Webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion hosted by NextTime SKP on the role of CFOs in minimizing the impact of global pandemic. Our last webinar on the role of CFO and tax heads in managing COVID-19 generated a great response, and thus we thought that it will be a good idea to dive deeper by hosting a series of panel discussion on the topic that were broadly covered in our last session. A foremost priority for CFOs is to ensure enough cash and liquidities for their companies to operate in recent weeks. Due to complete halt on business activities, organizations are facing huge challenges in managing their liquidity. This is mainly because of the delay in payment by customers coupled with reduction in new sales. The current situation has also led to increase in the cost of short-term financing. At the same time, this pandemic environment has thrown few opportunities where what was looking impossible is looking very obvious today. In this environment, to minimize the disruptions, organizations are looking at measures like rigorous engagement with clients and customers, identifying innovative ways for effective collection process, reassessing funding capabilities, updating business plans and budgets with stress testing and situation analysis. The speed at which COVID-19 crisis is unfolding, CFOs and other professionals have to act swiftly to secure and control liquidity and protect their business. We therefore believe that this session will help CFOs and other finance professionals in identifying ways and means of managing liquidity after taking into consideration the severity of the impact and the industry they are working in. So joining us today's session is a team of experts to share their practical insight about the challenges businesses are currently facing and how it can be managed effectively. So let me introduce you to our panel member. Our first panel member is Neeraj Basrur. Neeraj, if you want to just wave your hand. Yeah. So Neeraj Basrur is a CFO of Blue Star Limited. He holds an extensive experience of over 2 decades as a finance expert in capital structuring, equity and debt, private equity deals, mergers, acquisitions, divestment, corporate structuring, and more. In his present role at Blue Star, he is responsible for management of all financial affairs, investor relations, and capital deployment, banking relations, etc. In the past, Neeraj was associated with HCL and Max India Limited and Max Bupa Health Insurance as a finance controller, VP Corporate Finance and CFO respectively. Welcome Neeraj, and thank you for joining us in this panel.
Thank you.
Yeah, the second panelist and the member is Kalish. His full name is Kalishwaran Arunachalam, but I will call him Kalish. He has joined as CFO at Eicher Motor just a couple of days back. Before Eicher, he was a CFO at Future Group. His 17 years of experience entails strategy planning, budgeting, finance accounting and management, corporate finance, investment management, etc. With industries like FMCG, food, fashion, retail and automotive. In the past, he has worked at TVS, Aditya Birla, Cadbury and Mondelez International. So welcome Kalish to the panel. Yeah, so the third member of the panel is Amit Gala, who is also a dear friend. He is the CFO at MSwipe Technologies. His areas of expertise are equity research, investor relations, corporate finance, banking and project finance. Prior to MSwipe, Amit was with Citibank, ICICI Bank, Barclays, C8, Tata Sky, holding various positions of finance. Alongside, he is also an angel investor at Inflection Point Venture. So welcome Amit to the panel. Yeah. So let us get started. The first question would be for all three panelists. So the first question is, what has been your experience in last 45 days in handling this pandemic situation, and what are the challenges and opportunities lying ahead for corporates in India? Maybe I'll start with Kalish, followed by Neeraj and Amit. Kalish, you can share your views, please.
Thanks, Mayank. I think to start with, it's been a tsunami that struck us on day one. Having said that, one way to look at it is that it was supposed to be a contagious infection, which hit the shores of China somewhere in late December. There was adequacy of time available in hindsight till end of February or even first week of March to see how do we look at India as a country and how do we respond, at least at a corporate level. But the prior experience of what Ebola or a SARS has caused maybe made us a little bit more a take it easy approach when we thought the way in which it is going to come and strike India. So when it struck, it was definitely a tsunami that came in. It was a tsunami that started on slow waves as the stage 1 infections came into India, as the lockdown 1.0 started going into 3.0. The phase of impact has been severe. Operationally, I would represent probably my previous organization, considering I'm just about 2 days old in Aisha. Revenues were nil from around, say, early first week of March, because all the stores has to be shut, being in fashion business and non-essential category. It meant that there are going to be 3 or 4 challenges that was striking at us. Underlying key criteria being liquidity. But over and above, the starting point was to ensure the welfare of all our stakeholders, including our employees. So a lot of action was taken to ensure that that is first protected. The next one was to look at how do we stop all the pipeline projects, including expansion and new doors. So that has to be stalled in as an immediate action. The third one was around working capital management. Considering that it's a fashion cycle, a collective call was taken that we need to roll over one season, and existing inventory needs to be carried forward to the next season to convert that into cash. But keeping all these things aside, in fact, the first thing that COVID taught us is that the new norms of short term, medium term, long term. We define short term as 1 month, medium term as 3 months, and anything above 3 months suddenly looked as long term, because it was quite an uncertain and volatile world from that perspective. Under that redefinition, the 1 month to 3 month cycle was all about a very, very simple philosophy of keeping the lights on. Thankfully, we were surrounded with marquee private equities who were there on board, who could bring in a lot of global practices of how other countries and especially China has handled it. And step one was always to keep the lights on. So we did all those things only to the extent of keeping the lights on, the employee salaries and other obligations that need to be taken care for that. And a parallel work track was created to get cost reduction in. Multiple tracks around rental, operating expenditure, and store OPEX were relooked at it. We also created a liquidity generation platform. Opportunities were evaluated right from taking COVID support lines to the extent of when is the right timing to tap into equity market also. It's not the form, but liquidity at any form is probably having that on the side is a better space to be in than looking at the modus operandi at this point of time. So, time to opportunities, I think Touchwood, I would need to refer that probably we were slightly ahead of curve, and as we look at it today, there are at least 4 or 5 tracks available, of which 1 or 2 is already actioned and converted, and 2, 3 can get actioned in the near term to get the entire liquidity platform ring fenced. So that's probably the challenge that what COVID brought in, and how did we handle about it. Opportunity, I think the new normal is going to really set up a very, very different way in which we're going to look at the world, starting from workforce working from home, which also means that there's lesser carbon footprint, lesser congestion, which means the infra quality can significantly develop, which means that it can positively impact consumption in the long run. The second thing also that we see as new normal is there are sectors which is digital and digital led, and healthcare and FMCG will have an upswing as I move into say 6 to 9 months down the line. So as much as a tsunami that has struck us, and it's still not sure is there a 4.0 waiting for us, I still believe that we are getting into probably hopefully a better world, maybe 9 to 12 months down the line. And what I always believe is, as a country, we are extremely resilient. We should be able to, we have been demonstrating an ability to embrace change, and we should be able to take this forward. Short-term pain is going to be significant, but we should be able to come out in the medium to long term.
Hey, thanks, Kalesh. And Neeraj, over to you to share your experience.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mayank, and good afternoon, everyone on the call. I guess Kalesh has nicely set the context and the tone for this discussion, and I will not repeat some of those things, but just to add a bit of my perspective as to what and how things have unfolded in the last 2 months. The fact is that in the beginning of March, the visibility that this pandemic will travel into India in such big numbers was not entirely experienced or getting experience in that context. Number one. Number two, I guess no one could have imagined the kind of lockdown actions the government will initiate and the stringency of those. While in Maharashtra, Mumbai, even a week ahead of the national lockdown, things had started to shut down, malls were shut down, and offices were instructed to work at 30% capacity. Probably the feeling was, yeah, there'll be disruption in pockets, but a nationwide shutdown, I doubt that anyone imagined, because if anyone had imagined it, say 3 weeks ago, there would have been some contingency planning done for sure. So while that's behind us now, the situation is that, of course, as the things started to unfold in the month of March, and thereafter, the prime important variable or aspect of every business that needed to be immediately brought on the table was liquidity. As we are all familiar, when we get into an aircraft, we hear these safety announcements, and the one we are familiar, we have stopped listening to a lot of them, but the one which will resonate, it says that in the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you, and to start the flow of oxygen, pull the mask towards you. I guess for every business, this oxygen mask in the form of liquidity not being there all of a sudden become a reality. So none of us had imagined, none of us could predict this. Now, having got into that phase or mode or a challenge where the bloodline for a business, which is cash flow, needed to be organized, I guess every business, almost businesses have been working on that front, drawing down their working capital limits, arranging short-term loans, making arrangements for the immediate term. So I guess that's been one important course correction measure which had to be taken to immediately arrange for cash. Having arranged for cash in the last 40 days, the next step which I guess businesses will end up taking is to look at the capital structure itself, because what needed to be done 40 days ago was appropriate in that context, may need some changes now as we go forward. And so certainly I am talking about how we are thinking in Blue Star. So usually we would not get into short-term, we will not get into long-term financing ever. But now we are also thinking that, okay, fine, this uncertainty is here to stay. Nobody can predict whether it's going to be another 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, or even longer. It may be prudent and appropriate to have some longer-term loans on the balance sheet. So that creates enough runway for the business to reorganize, for the business to stabilize, and then start falling in action. So asset liability maturity profiles have taken a new dimension completely. That's one big learning. The second big learning, again, around availability of money is what kind of relationships one had cultivated in the phase prior to this pandemic. Because all said and done, even the bankers are at a challenge as to how do they assess creditworthiness. Every business model is up in the air, and nobody can predict what will happen. So for bankers, the only measure left is the overall credibility and the creditworthiness every company would have demonstrated in the years leading up to this event. In addition to, of course, the liquidity management, there have been several other course corrections. I won't repeat what Kalesh has spoken about, very much in order, right from procurement corrections to follow up on collections more than ever before, because everyone is facing the same challenge, but then you have to go back and ask the customer when they can pay. Managing suppliers. So one of the things we did in Blue Star in the month of March, on around 30th March, we made sure that all MSME suppliers got paid. So while there was immediate crunch on cash, we were also mindful that, yes, of course, we will need money, but let's try and make sure that all small suppliers are also taken care of. So that was one very conscious action, because this ecosystem, because normalization will resume in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But then unless this supplier ecosystem exists, then there's a problem. So in this entire situation, how to support to whatever extent one can the supplier, because it's very easy to say no, that we can't pay you, we are not getting our collection, so we will pay you. But how, even if it's in a constrained manner, how to keep paying to suppliers and raising more loans on our balance sheet to help the suppliers. So that's one perspective I just wanted to add. Cost structures will undergo a complete change, regardless of the sector, regardless of the business, regardless of the company. All companies will probably be compelled to relook at their cost structures, to what extent cost structures are fixed, to what extent cost structures are variable, and how can the resilience of cost structures be improved going ahead. Fat will get cut out, wastage will get eliminated, that is for sure. And as a consequence, on the opportunity side, productivity will improve, because if everyone is looking at the effectiveness of every rupee being spent, productivity is bound to go up. Just before I conclude, what from my own experience, what has helped in the past. I've been through a couple of crisis situations in the past as well, but nothing meets this one. The communication becomes very important. Communication with all stakeholders, be it employees, suppliers, customers, dealers, vendors, government agencies, and the transparency level with which you communicate. There is absolutely no hesitation in going to a bank and say that, look, there's a problem, I need help, rather than trying to make it up with a set of projections, which we all can. But be transparent, communicate. So that's one part. The commitment to governance and ethics was never as important as it is now. One of the important yardstick being used by bankers and investors is their own comfort on the ethical standards and the governance norms practiced by every company or every business house in the past, because that is a reflection on how they will respond in the new COVID environment post all this dust settles down. So I can't emphasize enough on the need and importance to course correct on governance and ethics, to the extent there may still be rough edges and something needs to be polished around. This is the time to demonstrate the impact of that. The last point I will say, so far, we all have traditionally in the finance domain, we look at working capital, we look at fixed capital to fund capex. The time has now come to start talking about solvency capital for every business. Most regulated businesses like banks, insurance companies have a concept of solvency capital, but unregulated sectors do not. But with this experience, there is a need for every company to define, determine, and quantify their own solvency capital and raise that and keep it. Because whether one element has got demonstrated with this pandemic, that the disruptive impact of a pandemic cannot be ruled out even in future. And with this interconnected world that we have, this can get the entire disruption can happen in a matter of 90 days. So solvency capital becomes very important in terms of managing liquidity. I guess all of us are wiser now. We will be wiser even more 3 months from now, and there's a lot of learnings which will come out. But overall, I guess it's very important to learn from this situation, learn from this entire experience, work towards strengthening relationships across all stakeholders, work towards enhancing the resilience and agility of the business, and work towards identifying opportunities which can be used as a new in the new horizon post normalcy getting resumed, in this situation. So those are some of my thoughts. I'll be happy to answer a specific question when we get to the Q&A form and share whatever experience we've had in the last 40 days or so.
Thank you for the comprehensive response and different angles which you have brought in, from business to non-business angle. All the angles you have covered at this stage. Amit, maybe if you'd like to add, because Kaleesha and Neeraj has covered a lot of ground, but definitely you will have your own perspective considering the industry from where you come from. So maybe you'd like to share your views.
Sure. So thanks, Kaleesha and Neeraj. I think you guys have covered a lot. But just to add to that, last 45 days, I mean, the whole thing started with obviously the lockdown coming in force in a very, very rapid way. However, fortunately, we were a bit more prepared in terms of, we were tracking this whole event globally, at least what was happening for over a month. And therefore, given the workforce that we have, about 5,000 plus people across India on the ground, we were ready with a sort of a BCP plan or a work from home, plan, etc. So all the infrastructure, the IT backend preparedness, etc. that we needed to do, we were, fortunate enough to be a bit ahead of the curve, and we were kind of ready with our response. So I think that there we had a slight advantage, and then obviously, things kind of unfolded, and the biggest thing was the whole impact on the business, on the revenue, on the cash flows, etc. And again, I think we were fortunate to kind of get to some of the inputs from our investors, etc. And therefore, we immediately kind of started working on what if this whole thing continues for another 6 months, 12 months, so on and so forth. And we kind of started preparing plans, both liquidity as well as the whole, OPEX and stuff like that. So we kind of started off with ruthlessly looking at, our whole business model and the whole business construct, right from, what is our servicing model, how do we measure the productivity of the team, how do we align our costs to the output KPI, and therefore what are the unwanted, OPEX, and started cutting out, the unwanted OPEXs. I would say right from mid-March to end March, we started doing that exercise, and we kind of ruthlessly, because a lot of contracts, a lot of vendor contracts have to have some amount of notice when you kind of get out of them. And again, whether it's renegotiating rent contracts or renegotiating any other contractual sort of service contracts, etc., we triggered those at the very beginning. So much so that some of the people kind of felt that, okay, it's just a 21-day, 3-week kind of a lockdown, and I think our response is a little bit exaggerated. But I think in hindsight, we were right. And today, therefore, we are in a much comfortable position as far as some of those items are concerned. And since then, we've been, as an organization, as a leadership team, have been tracking our runway cash, our cash positions against, our projected monthly kind of P&L and our, other obligations very, very closely, very, very regularly, along with the investors. So I think, like Neeraj said, the key guiding principle in such times is communication, and transparently communicating the situation and the scenarios that we are working with a lot, whether it's your employees, whether it's investors, whether it's customers, whether it's your contracted parties, and which end up while initially it did kind of seemed a bit unpleasant for some, but I think in hindsight, I think that transparency and that forthrightness helps building a healthy relationship, right? And I think that's something that we've consciously been doing. The other thing that we did was we constantly kept the entire teams, all the teams across organization engaged, especially when you have a huge workforce on the ground, how do you kind of keep them productive? So, and how do you kind of keep them productive, not just from a learning and development perspective, but also contributing to the bottom line, right? So a lot of initiatives were identified which would directly impact the bottom line. Some sort of let's say inventory recon is to be done, some pending collections to be done, etc. Pending contracts to be closed with the customers, so on and so forth. So a lot of output-driven activities were identified and driven across the organization to fruitfully utilize the time. And so I think the experience is that if I were to summarize it, is to say that how do you kind of foresee these kind of situations and put in place an action plan, assuming that this environment will prevail for 3 to 6 months, and then define actions. I think that was a very, very helpful thing for us, and that kind of driven a lot of actions, which in hindsight I feel that were really, really gave us a lot of head start. So that's my take.
Yeah, thanks, Amit, for sharing your views and experience. So for me, there are 2 to 3 takeaways very clearly. One is looking at your strategy splitting into 3 parts: short term, medium term, and long term. And those period won't be like 1 year and 3 years and 7 years. It would be like in months. We can't go like the way we used to do it earlier in a traditional way. Secondly, a lot of us were not ready. We were unprepared with the tsunami which is going to come. I think we never envisaged the possible impact of, or possible the challenges which we'll be facing because of this pandemic. Third is the asset liability mismatch. I think that is going to become a complete chaos if we don't manage it well. And the last one is, as Neeraj said, and I also strongly believe in so, is relationship, communication, and transparency. I think these 3 are going to be the key while you are moving ahead. These 3 things has to be there with all the stakeholders, from supplier to customer to all the other stakeholders. So thank you all. Going to the more specific questions. So we have touched upon some portion of the liquidity management, working capital requirement, and other stuff. So I have a few specific questions for each one of you. And the first question I'll be asking it to Neeraj is that specifically in the few industry sectors, inventory is going to play an important role in managing liquidity. So how organization is changing their strategy to manage inventory to improve the liquidity? Neeraj, because you come from an industry where inventory is going to play a huge role, I just thought maybe you would be the right person to give your insight on that matter.
Absolutely. Thank you. So there are 2 aspects to inventory management in the context of this current environment. So this is, keep in mind, this is not usual inventory planning and you do your minimum order quantity planning and all that. So there are 2 aspects. So first aspect is that what is the level of stock which as an entity you may be having beginning April and March, because that's where the lockdown happened. And what are you going to do with that stock? Because now obviously there have not been any sales. Now there could be sectors where some of that inventory could be perishable. That there could be sectors where, as the fashions change, as the seasons change, it may become obsolete. So obsolescence is another factor. So the first part of this inventory management is to have a plan as to how are you going to liquidate that inventory. Of course, you may not have enough visibility of by when you will be able to liquidate, but how. That even if you have clarity on how, that's good enough for this point in time. The second part is around, okay, now you may be having certain orders in the pipeline when this entire thing happened, because in a running business, you usually keep ordering and keep, now what are you going to do with those orders? So that's where some really difficult conversations with the suppliers need to happen. That's imperative. That look, some orders will need to be postponed or deferred or cancelled. That's the second part of inventory management discussion. The third part is, in the new world, I'm calling it new world, which is yet to emerge. world, customer preferences, and how soon can you start and getting a sense on, okay, now everyone is impacted, be it a corporation or an individual on the street. So obviously impact on household incomes, impact on disposable incomes, impact on what consumers will go out and spend or not spend, impact on how they will spend or not spend, at least in the foreseeable next 9 months to a year. Keeping all that in mind, what should be the product and service portfolio? And specifically on inventory. So going ahead, so obviously it may be wise to at least keep in mind that the inventory, the product portfolio across sectors may undergo changes. So the need may be there. The need for products may be there, but then the entire structure of what the customers are willing to pay for and how much may undergo changes. So it is going to get resolved in stages, starting immediately with here and now. What will you do for the inventory which you already have? Moving on to how the entire product portfolio and inventory planning needs to go from here. That's how I see the inventory situation play out.
Yeah. No, thanks, Neeraj. And I think that was quite practical input. So my perspective, I just would like to share also on the inventory before I go to the next question, is that I think the inventory management is now going to become a kind of a boardroom topic. Earlier it was more of a finance and the corporate governance and their items. In the current times, more innovative solution needs to be implemented. I'm sure everyone has a model of forecasting the inventory and demand forecasting and supply forecasting and production planning and other stuff. But one need to relook at their entire model of forecasting to ensure that the dynamic situation which we are into today are being considered while they are forecasting. It's going to be very tough to determine what is the inventory sizing and the inventory minimum inventory which one need to keep. So I believe it's going to be a tough time in terms of balancing the inventory requirement versus the demand in the market, and people need to come out with a innovative solution. So that's my take. Inventory being a very important part of the working capital management. The another aspect in the working capital management would be with respect to raising funds. And Amit, coming to you, the next question is that how should an organization look at ways of raising the funds in this situation? Because not necessarily you will be able to generate the liquidity internally completely. So which are the ways and means through which you would be raising the funds?
So, like you said, liquidity will be a very, very critical aspect going forward. And apart from doing all the internal stuff, you will still, have to look for, some ways of external funding coming in to be able to see through these tough times, which most probably will, go on once this whole immediate reaction is over. I think it is still the economic activity to turn around will still take about 6 to 9 months. And then therefore it's very important to kind of plan for those scenarios and have options available and then think through those scenarios as well. So I think the first and the most important thing is, especially for organizations like ours, which are, startups, it's very important to have the line up some sort of equity funding options lined up. And then some of these could be, may not be necessarily be pure equity instruments, could be a debt equity instrument, hybrid instruments, etc. But it's very important to think through those, plan and then start those and keep those discussions going, and then keep the investors, bankers, etc. engaged at these times. And there are if you have a solid business, I think you will have investors backing you and capital coming in for you. But what is very important is to be able to plan those scenarios and not be under an assumption that this is going to get over in 2 months, 3 months, etc. I think this will go on for a while in terms of the whole economic impact and the aftermath of this pandemic. And like Neeraj said, there will be a whole new. It's going to be a new world. I mean, some of the customers will churn out, some of the new customers will come in. So, your revenue lines will kind of change, your cost lines will change, etc. So be ready with the realistic plan for next 12 to 18 months, 2 years, etc., and keep the right set of stakeholders engaged for equity capital, for loan capital, for hybrid capital, and so.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. And just to add what you said, Amit, is that it would be best not to assume that the funding channels that were previously easily available will continue to remain available the way it was available earlier. So one will have to reassess their funding capability, especially for short term in this pandemic environment. Going next, Kalesh, you did mention about various aspects with respect to the OPEX and the operational cost optimization. So what, according to you, can be ways and means of reducing OPEX, and what should be your approach towards this entire OPEX optimization management?
Yeah, so two parts to it. Maybe I'll also chip in with the famous, probably a process under the audit and accounting standards that we use to perform, which probably was done for 0.1% of the companies called as going concern. So that used to be like a question that is asked and you just pass through by saying that's of no relevance. Today, at a world, country, state level, everyone is being tested for going concern. So survival capital is going to be extremely critical currently to continue businesses. So in that kind of an environment, I think it's important that we start becoming realistic in terms of how are we managing our business and business assets. There would be portfolios. So cost reduction, we see it in three buckets. One is portfolio which you thought are sometimes worth for long term, which you gave a long rope to perform. So say, for example, if there are stores or a business or a small division which is not profitable, which we considered strategic and had to give a long rope, we may have to drop that and take a call right now because it's a question of survival capital. Second thing that we need to look at is that in terms of operating the businesses, some of the costs that we incur is fixed in nature. So again, in the past, the paradigm was always about can we walk a little bit from both the sides and come to a negotiation point where we agree on a particular level of cost reduction. This is another thing where CFOs need to be decisive in driving business conversations, where the ability to say no and even let go of properties or stores that are not viable has to be even more strong at this point of time. So that's the second area that I would see. Third is in terms of inventory and other stuffs that Neeraj touched in. I think it is extremely difficult to forecast demand at this point of time. So what we are trying to work on is that how much you can reduce your supply chain cycle. What used to be a 6-month cycle, can we do a 3 to 2 month cycle? And therefore, you don't commit on the entire working capital requirement, and closer to business operations, can we take a call on that and take it forward? The fourth and probably the most sensitive topic that is going around is on employee cost. So that's kind of a white elephant that is there in every organization. But I think we need to be pragmatic about it, right? It is like obviously important to ensure that we create an environment where stakeholders, including employees, are taken care. But at some point of time, if businesses are staring at no revenue and there are no cash reserves available, and if the lines to get in is going to be difficult, and light at the end of the tunnel is going to be slightly farther in terms of timeline, we may need to relook at how do we look at optimizing the employee cost. It doesn't mean that you have to lay it off. How much of this can be a model that is on variable or long-term incentives that can be brought in? So it's a win-win situation for both the organization and the employee.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Kalesh, on sharing your perspective on the OPEX. Just one more point, and which I'll be asking Neeraj. While we discussed about various topics, I think one of the topic which is nearer or dearer to all of us is the receivable management. And account receivable is going to play the huge role in this entire liquidity management in today's world. So Neeraj, how can an organization optimize receivable and collection management process in this period of time? It has been a favorite topic for the CFOs earlier, but in this situation, it is going to be like a nightmare for the CFOs.
I agree, ma'am. Actually, again, I would like to segment this entire topic across 2 or 3 buckets. So the first one is, of course, if your customers are organized, large corporates who have access to lines of credit, then of course you got to request them, follow up, chase, whatever you need to do to get the money out, because these guys are big boys. Probably they can afford to pay. So that's one category where the tendency may be to delay, but then the operating teams, the commercial teams, finance teams have to work together and get that money chased out. The second category of customers would be who are not so well organized. Okay, the MSME guys, or the guys who may not have access to the working capital. There, the point is to try and support them, because like in our case, there are thousands of distributors and dealers and stores who will sell retail products. Not all of them may have the ability to raise working capital. So can they be supported in the short term with a little bit of an extended credit, or offer a cash discount so that it is a win-win? So obviously this guy also then gets to save some money, and cash comes in. So there are 2 approaches possible. The third approach on the smaller guys is for the larger companies to leverage their banking relationships and set up channel financing, customer financing, and some financing arrangements for the ecosystem. The last point I want to make on the receivables management, again in the new world, it may be prudent and appropriate and required for every company to reassess credit worthiness of their entire customer base, and what kind of commercial norms are going to be in order in terms of credit period or credit extension will be a new reality as well. You can't assume that 3 months ago a particular customer who was probably a well-paying customer may remain equally well-paying, say 2 months from now. So this is a phase. Again, I use an analogy from airplane, where you're going through turbulence. You got to tighten the seat belt, and tightening the seat belt involves tightening the credit norms as well. So it's a mix of actions, right from collecting cash, supporting the ecosystem to the extent you can, and going ahead, making sure you have tightened the seat belts, looked at the credit norms, look at the credit worthiness, and reassessed how you want to play out the contracts going ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks, Neeraj. And I think I really like the way you explained the 3 cluster of the customers, and you segment them into 3 parts, because your approach for each cluster of the customer would be different. And also the another part where large corporates who have a fantastic relationship with the bankers, how they can leverage that relationship and ensure that the entire ecosystem gets benefited is going to be the key, because then the entire ecosystem can function better and everyone's receivable management is taken care of. So thanks, Neeraj, for it. And going back, going to the next question is that we have covered working capital, we have covered inventory, we have covered receivable management and fundraising. See, the government is also coming out with various options of helping corporates. So I would like Amit, Kalesh, and Neeraj, all 3 of you, to maybe share very quickly your thoughts on the benefits which governments are coming out with, which will help corporates to improve their liquidity. If you can share your perspective on the government schemes. So maybe Kalesh, you may want to start with.
See, again, we need to look at 2 or 3 buckets into this. One is, I think there is also an underlying. We need to be mindful that as much as we want government to open up the entire reforms agenda, there is a sovereign rating that can come under risk if it goes beyond a point. So it is, as much as we want to ask, we need to balance out by not forgetting the long term while we are trying to address the short term in hand. So that leaves us with 3 choices that we need to make. One is in terms of fundamental tax collection that the government is looking at, which is around, say, GST and direct tax. Is there any kind of a short-term reforms that can be provided for people to cope up some kind of cash that can be generated through this? Second is in terms of banking support. The entire activity around TLTRO has been warmly welcomed. The additional liquidity that was provided into the financial markets was also warmly welcomed. Maybe today I saw the announcement around MSMEs also getting disbursed to keep the economy well oiled. One thing that we would also like to see that how much of this is moving from the order into action. If there is a way in which a little bit of transparency and tracking can be brought around this, that would also help in a significant manner for everyone to keep the economic engine on the banking side. The third thing that I would like to put across is maybe this is the time where we can look at a little bit more reformist agenda and see what are the sectors where we can open up FDI. It is important to note that there is capital available in abundance at some point of or some parts of the world, and deployment is being searched at for attractive valuations available. So valuations are attractive and people can take long-term bets, which we have been seeing in the past in many companies where private equities and strategic investors have started coming in with the long-term view in hand. It might be an opportunity to open up FDI and attract investments into certain sectors. That's the additional way of getting capital in without disturbing the entire sovereign rating of the country. So these three buckets is what I see are good tools available. A proactive management around this would by the companies to partner with the government and take it forward could lead to a faster and quicker tangible solutions.
Right. Thanks, Kalesh. Amit, you would like to share your thoughts around this?
Right. So I think one thing which has obviously helped a lot of small businessmen and is the whole loan moratorium that has been done. Unfortunately, there has been few initial hiccups in the way in which it has been done, but by and large now things are kind of streamlined. What remains one open item is the morat being given by NBFCs to their customers and the morat being given by banks to NBFCs. And what we've heard is that a lot of NBFCs are struggling, with getting this morat from the banks. And I think that is something where a government should do something proactively. I'm sure they will, and that would kind of ease a lot of liquidity related issues for small borrowers, or especially the substandard or the tier 2 of the borrower. Customers who've taken home loans from NBFCs or business loans from NBFCs, etc. Those segment I think will get a relief. And that's very important. And also for the overall system, it's very important for NBFCs to see through this whole crisis. And hence, I think that is one thing which is very critical, which I think government should, RBI and the government should kind of do that. But on the bank side, yes, a lot of people have taken the morat benefit. The other thing is whole, liquidity measures being taken by NABARD and SIDBI and stuff like that, which while it will percolate down to it will kind of take time to trickle down to the lowest level and for the impact to be seen. But I think in the longer term, there are still good measures being taken. And the other aspect is obviously the deferment of taxation, etc. That the government has rolled out, the schemes that they've rolled out, etc. But I think the biggest thing is the banking and the financial system being well oiled with the liquidity. So hoping for that to come.
Yeah, thanks, Neeraj. I am just skipping a response from you, considering that I would like to take few questions from the participants which we have already received. But I think government, as far as from the liquidity is concerned, I think government is trying to give a booster dose to the economy. But when you compare with the other global countries, like in India, the government has spoken about almost rupees 10 lakhs crores, which is 5% of the GDP as a booster dose. But when we look at the other countries like of US and UK, they are like 15% to 20% of GDP. Though it's not comparable, but government is trying their best. Coming to the question, so we have received lots of questions from the participants, but we may not be able to accommodate all the questions in next 10 minutes. However, we'll try our best to accommodate maximum questions. So the first question which we have received from the participant is, can customer take this pandemic event as a force measure and delay or not pay to us? I think this question has come. Neeraj, you would like to share your experience, because the force measure has been the topic or the hot topic in the market for the discussion, and how the contractual obligations one are going to adhere to or obliged to.
Yeah. So it's been I guess research in the last 40 days a lot as to whether a pandemic is a force majeure event or not, and there is clarification from MHA as well. So this indeed is a force majeure event, which is not in the control of either the customer or the service provider or the supplier. Now again, while very technically, yes, one can take shelter under the overall umbrella of a force majeure, that this has happened, so how can I honor my performance obligations? And therefore, I should not be subjected to any penal action or any liability or any exposure. That stand can be taken, which is a very legal way of looking at the situation. In reality, see what is happening. While I guess a lot of companies have exchanged these letters as suppliers, customers, etc., vendors, but in reality, I guess I go back to my point on relationship management and being transparent. There are discussions going on. I guess everyone is being reasonable. That's the other experience I want to share. The stakeholders are being reasonable amongst each other, with each other, and trying to empathize with the situation the other counterparty is going through. So far, I am not seeing any trends where under the umbrella of force majeure, people are trying, or companies may try to just avoid honoring the commitments. That's not happening yet. But of course, if things were to not improve, then this is indeed a measure which may need to be invoked legally and contractually as well.
Right. Thanks, Neeraj. So the summary is that it's a force measure, but whether to use this legally or not is a question mark, as well as people are trying to balance practically, and based on the relationship, people are managing their stakeholder expectations and managing the obligations. Second question was customer terms or the contract extension is becoming a challenge when you are not among the top suppliers for that customer. Similarly, getting extended credit terms from suppliers is also becoming difficult. How important the size of the business and relationship matters? Kalesh, you would like to take this question, maybe?
Sure, Mayank. I think it will boil down to the, I think every organization is going to bucket this under vendors who are critical for operations and non-critical. And again, there will be segmental preferences between MSME and non-MSME vendors. What I would see again is in terms of the relationship that the vendor customer has managed over a period of time is what is going to come in handy. And in some cases where there is cash reserves available, a little bit of pull and push can help to solve this over. In other cases, it is by and large going to be relationship driven. Or in some of the cases, what we felt is that, say, for example, if we have a property where the landlord has taken a loan from the bank and he has got his EMIs due, so there is no point in him extending credit to us. A large organization has to step in for his banking negotiation also. How do we sit along with him and help him to defer his EMIs through moratorium or other model is equally critical to support the vendors. By and large, net, it will be driven through partnership and relationship.
Right. Thanks, Kalesh. Going to the next question is that in the current circumstances, what aspects should one consider while prioritizing their capital investment plans? So Amit, would you like to take this up? It's more about, how you are going to plan your capital investments in the given circumstance and what factors one will consider.
So I think, on the capital investment side, I think it boils down to, again, identifying and prioritizing what are the key strategic investments for the long-term, long-term business growth, etc., even in a post-COVID world, right? And those investments surely, will have to be kind of, the organizations and the businesses will have to back those things up. There are, in the this whole pandemic situation, there was also abundance of capital, etc. And there were also a lot of non-strategic or good to have kind of, priorities of the business, as we would call it, adjacencies, etc. And I think those investments will surely come into question. So what is core to the business? And therefore, the core investment, the investments around that core to the business, even in the post-COVID situation, will be backed up. And I think for a lot of organizations like ours, and we've seen this, that there are some business initiatives which require a lot of capital investment, and we thought that, maybe what will happen to that. But investors are ready to back those which are very core to the, core to the business, our own business and the whole growth story that we had envisaged. But yeah, surely the ones which are adjacencies have to be kind of pruned wisely.
Right.
So that's what I think will happen.
Right. Thanks, Amit. So it's very clear that something which is very strategically important for the business and the functioning of business, you can't compromise on making those investments because it will affect you long-term badly. Something which are not very strategic in nature, you can definitely take a conscious call of postponing those investments in long-term investments. So the last question which I'll take, I have a few more questions, but considering the paucity of time, which sector liquidity would be impacted to a large extent in a long run by COVID-19? Neeraj, you would like to take this up very briefly, if you can just share your views on the sectors, and then I'll have a concluding remarks.
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, there'll be many sectors where the impact will be profound, right? From hospitality to aviation to travel to real estate, infrastructure. Any sector which needs the customer to have a tangible connect, until and unless there is a vaccine and until unless all of us feel comfortable and sure of venturing out, those sectors may have a greater impact. Sectors which are likely to be less impacted will be, of course, starting with health, because health is on top of everyone's mind. Anything that we need to consume. Now, consumption at home will increase, be it durables, be it electronics, be it technology. I think given an opportunity, everyone will like to beef up their home offices. So you can imagine some of those sectors will do better. And there'll be some innovation around how sectors can re-channelize, remodel themselves. So rather than going and dining out, probably fine dining served at your home in a more safe environment. So some of that will happen. I guess opportunities will also arise, and it may be in order for everyone, like I said earlier, to relook at the business model and the market opportunities and the customer context, and start understanding the customer preferences very quickly to reshape their strategies.
Right. No, so thanks, Neeraj, for sharing your views. And this brings us to the end of our today's session. I am very thankful to all our participants and panel members for your time. We know that we have not answered few more questions which has been raised, but we would be definitely like to answer those questions by an email. So please feel free to reach out to us. So we covered the critical areas of liquidity management. We learned about the ways and means in which we can look at OPEX, inventory management, receivable management. We touched upon the topic of liquidity through fundraising, and lastly, the scheme introduced by the government. We hope that you have drawn reasonable amount of information from this session and that it will help you to understand and evaluate your strategies and make informed decision taking into consideration the talent, operation, suppliers, customers, and other key stakeholders who are there. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining in. Our next topic from the series will be optimization on 22nd May. At the same time, we'll be sending out the invite very soon. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Bye.